Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the final webinar hosted by the National Traction Engine Trust. And tonight, the clue is in the back screen. We'll be looking at manufactured fuels, and we will be bringing in members from CPL. The two guys with us have a huge amount of knowledge in manufactured fuels, and I'll be talking to them in a second. But just tonight, I wanted us to focus on the future as to how we might fuel our engines. I think, as we all know, lump coal is scheduled to be phased out of the nation in not too many years' time. So we have been working as a trust with CPL to try and develop a successful fuel that will allow us to enjoy our engines well into the future when lump coal has ceased to be available. So tonight I'd like to welcome our own Tom Attwood, who has been working tirelessly for the trust in looking at the coal question. Tom, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Rob. And may I add what a pleasure it is this evening to be part of this webinar and sharing with all of you the updates and progress that we've made with CPL over the last 12 to 18 months. It's a great opportunity to share this information. I hope it's quite a relaxing and informal evening, but equally informative. We have two people with us from CPL who have been absolutely key in this development, who Rob will go on to introduce, but I would just like to personally thank them for their time and input that they've given us, certainly over the last 18 months. And as I say, it's a pleasure to share the introduction of them with all of you, members and non-members alike, and those who have helped contribute with trial data over the last 12 months. So thank you very much.
Okay. Just before I move to my next guest, which is Graham, just like to remind all the attendees, the viewers, if you do get called away this evening, we'll be sad not to see you, but you can look on YouTube and the National Traction Engines website, and you'll be able to view all of our webinars. So we'll be putting them there for view afterwards. But my next guest, Graham, welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. It's I hope all your members are going to find it interesting and informative. Just to recap on what Tom said. Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work with NTET and the heritage sectors in general, and hopefully your members will find this of interest.
I'm absolutely certain they will, and we've got a list of things we'd like to discuss with you. But finally, and by no means least, Julian, a very warm welcome to this evening's this event, and you are the sales manager for CPL, I believe.
That's correct. Yeah, I'm the sales director at CPL Industry. So many thanks for inviting me on tonight, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're very much looking forward to telling the members what we've been doing, and a little bit more about ourselves, and give some insight as to what we think the future might look like, not only in terms of manufactured fuels, but in terms of coal availability and the impact that may or may not have for your members.
Super, thank you. I mean, I think it's really important that our members grasp that we've been incredibly fortunate as road steam users to be able to partner up with CPL and actually have first-hand input into creating a fuel that we very much hope will fire us into the future. So, Julian, can I ask you to tell us a bit about CPL, your history and the business? Because to me, it's a three-letter word, but I'd love to hear some of the background.
Yeah, sure. Personally, I've been with CPL for 14 years now, and I've been involved with selling our range of manufactured fuels along with a lot of other solid fuels such as wood and charcoal and other products through multiple channels, whether that be direct to the consumer or through coal merchants or into industrial or heritage markets. So I kind of came into the industry knowing absolutely nothing 14 years ago, and now I know a little bit of something. So I'll try and impart some of that, and hopefully people will find it useful. CPL Industries has been around since the early 90s. We were born from National Smokeless Fuels, which was part of British Coal. We've obviously been through various nationalisations and privatisations over the years, but we've been private since the early 90s. CPL now stands for Carbon Products Limited, which really reflects the fact that we're not just about coal, but in fact we are a carbons business, and our business is centred around the use of carbon in different applications, whether that be for fuel in different markets that I've just discussed, or even in other products applications such as filtration processes through our activated carbon business, and lots of R&D that we're doing around carbon. So CPL is all about carbon in whatever form that may well be. Our core part of our manufacturing arm is obviously the manufacture of smokeless fuels. We are the largest manufacturer of smokeless fuels in Europe. We've been doing it for 75 years. We plan on doing it for at least another 75 years, which will certainly see me out and hopefully a few more generations beyond me. We have capacity to make about 500,000 tonnes a year with production plants, 2 in the UK and 1 in Ireland, in Foynes, County Limerick. As well as our manufacturing arm, we have a distribution business which is called HomeFires Group, and that has a heritage dating back to the 1800s when we were Barrington's coal merchants. Obviously over the last 200 years we've made numerous acquisitions and gone through many different changes, but we do have quite a large pedigree. We service many markets, whether it be direct to the end consumer, the domestic consumer, which is obviously our core market, but we supply that not only direct to the consumer but through major retailers such as B&Q and Tesco's and alike, coal merchants, which is still the single biggest route to market, a very important market in the UK. But more recently, we've done more and more with both industrial and heritage markets as well. And that's accelerated an enormous amount over the last 12 to 18 months for reasons we can probably all understand. We're market leaders in what we do. We have a recognised brand, which is called HomeFire. We put an awful lot of energy and expenditure into developing that and promoting that brand. We not only supply into the UK, but we have extensive warehousing and distribution across the UK, particularly in Ireland, but Northern Europe, France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany as well. And we supply a wide range of fuels. It's not just about smokeless solid fuels, but traditional coals, anthracites, charcoal, wood products. So with a whole range of solid fuels. And one of our key differential to our competitors is that we are a huge pre-packer of solid fuels. So we currently have capacity of about 170,000 tonnes, and that will increase to over 200,000 tonnes by the end of this summer. So that's a huge part of the market for us. If just moving on to the next slide, that really just really just a snapshot on our simplified company structure. So CPL Industries is the parent company, and within that there are numerous trading divisions all set up as separate companies. The two I've highlighted in orange here are really the two that NTET members would most likely be associated with. So the HomeFire group is, as I said earlier, that's the distribution arm of the company. They are involved with the packing of the solid fuels, sourcing of a broader range of solid fuels such as wood and charcoal, and then the onward distribution to whomever the end user may be. And anybody buying in a pre-packed form would buy that through the HomeFire group. CPL Products really represents our manufacturing business up at Immingham, the two manufacturing plants there, and as well as our processing business. So we now have state-of-the-art washing facilities, which means we can bring in quite a broad range of raw materials and sizing and screening capabilities, and we can then sell that off into a lot of different markets as well. So the other parts of the company structure there are more related around international businesses or unrelated activities, such as refractory repairs, which is a business that is involved with the ceramic welding of blast furnaces, and activated carbons, which is a high growth sector for us, which is all about using carbon as a filtration process for liquids and gases and other applications. So it's a diverse group, you know, at its core is carbon, and core to that is solid fuels. If we just talk a little bit more then on the next slide, I'll talk about the Immingham manufacturing process. So just focusing in the UK here, our two manufacturing plants are based up at Immingham, up on the Humber on the docks there. We've been there now for nearly over 30 years. We've got two plants. Capacity of those two plants is about 350,000 tonnes per annum. We have two different technologies in place on each plant. So one plant uses a technology called mild heat treatment, and the other process plant uses a technology using cold cure. And I'll talk a little bit about that, because that will become relevant, I think. Essentially, when we make a smokeless ovoid, we take the raw materials, we blend them all together, we mix them all up just like you would a cake, and then in a mild heat treatment plant process, and we're the only people in Europe, if not the world, but certainly in Europe, that has this technology. The mild heat treatment plant, effectively, we then add to that mixture a molasses binder, and the molasses is a food grade sugar byproduct. We add that into the cake. It goes through the mold, and you can see the mold on the screen there, an outline of the tires there. And that, when it's gone through the mold, the briquette at that point is very soft. And the difference on the mild heat treatment plant is that that goes through a series of ovens, and the ovens have various temperature zones up to about 260 degrees. And the ovoids are effectively cooked for about an hour whilst they travel through the oven. When they come out of the oven, they go through a quench where they're cooled, and they're then put onto a stockpile, and they are immediately ready for sale. They are very, very hard, and they can be picked up and distributed immediately. The difference with the cold cure process is it goes through the same process. We mix all the ingredients together, but then rather than adding a food grade molasses binder, we add effectively a glue, an araldite effectively, and that glue is added to it. It then goes through the molds. The ovoid is produced. It's soft at that point, and then we do pass it through a set of ovens, but at a very, very low temperature, the temperature that we think sort of mimics a warm summer's day, a little bit of a breeze, about 30 degrees, and we pass it through. And when that ovoid falls off the end of the oven, it doesn't get quenched because it's not red hot, but it just falls onto a pile. And at that point, the ovoid will still require 24 to 48 hours to cure. So we can't dispatch that and sell that until that product is then fully cured. So the two very distinct processes, and there are advantages to both. The reason we introduced the cold cure process was that it allowed us to enter into some markets that we couldn't enter into otherwise. But there are advantages and drawbacks to both processes. At the moment, we are manufacturing ovoids for the heritage sector using a cold cure process, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a bit later, perhaps. Two manufacturing plants run completely independent of each other. They have their own set of experienced craftsmen. We have a number of apprenticeships as well as graduates that we employ at the plant, and we've got most of our employees are very long serving. We have 5 doctorates working up at the facility, helping in the labs and the R&D facilities. So we have an awful lot of experience, and we've been doing this for an awful long time. The R&D and lab facilities, again, really are a bit of a jewel in the crown for us. They allow us to look at lots of different types of raw materials, lots of different types of binding technologies, lots of different types of applications of how we could create ovoids and what applications they might go into. And that really does set us apart from everybody else. And then finally, I said we had another plant in Ireland, and we do. We have a third plant in Ireland that we built about 8 years ago now, and that's got capacity of about 150,000 tonnes per annum, and that solely services the Irish market, both north and south. In terms of, on the next slide, I'll just talk a little bit about what goes into a smokeless solid fuel, because I think there'll probably be a lot of people who may not really understand what does go into them, and perhaps are surprised at why certain products do go into them. So we use really 4 different types of products as the core base products that go into a smokeless ovoid. Anthracite for us has for a long time been our core base product for our ovoids. And the reason we use anthracite is because anthracite is obviously very high in fixed carbon, and because it's been in the ground longer than any other coal, whether that be peat or lignite or bituminous coal, it's very high in energy. And it's smokeless. The volatile matter has been compressed over millions of years, and you get effectively a smokeless fuel. Anthracite is obviously becoming a little bit more difficult to source with the closure of Celtic Energy last year, and we're obviously having to look further afield for that product. But it's a very important product in the manufacturing of ovoids. We use a little bit of bituminous coal, so we still use coal in our ovoids, not all of our ovoids, but a lot of them. And that's really because coal gives us that bit of reactivity that helps with the ignition process and refueling process, but also it gives that nice flame picture. So if the homeowner is looking for a fuel to put on their open fire on their stove and wants an attractive flame picture, coal certainly helps with that. Of course, we can't use too much coal, because if we use a lot of coal, the ovoid will become smoky, and our ovoids are smokeless. We're 80% less smoke than traditional coal, and that's with the pending legislation or legislation that's actually now in place, that's really important. So we use a little bit of coal. We'll come clean, and we'll also say to you, we use a little bit of pet coke. There'll be people there going, pet coke? Oh, we shouldn't be using that. And I'm aware that people have reservations about pet coke, but pet coke used in small quantities in a controlled manner, mixed with other fuels, other raw materials, is actually a really important part of any smokeless ovoid. It's smokeless itself. It's obviously gives a good heat output. It's reactive, and it's very low in ash, and so it can really help improve the blend of an ovoid. And if you're trying to produce an ovoid that is, hot, very low in ash, it can, and very reactive, it really does help in that process. Now, where pet coke becomes dangerous is when pet coke is used in high quantities. And some people do manufacture ovoids with a lot of pet coke. they can be quite damaging over the long term or medium term on appliances. And where petcoke got a really bad name for itself was when the UK government, 4 or 5 decades ago, extended the smoke control zones in the UK, and people switched to burning neat petcoke on their fires because it was a cheap alternative. And what happened was a lot of damage was done to a lot of appliances. A lot of fire bars were replaced, and you got to a point where local authorities started actually taking out open fires because the cost of replacing them was so expensive because people were using petcoke. So petcoke has to be used in the right quantity with the right amounts of other raw materials. And we do exactly that. We've been doing it for years. Every ovoid manufacturer puts a bit of petcoke in them. Some put more than others in. It just needs to be done in the right way and controlled in the right way.
Sorry, excuse me for interrupting. Would you mind telling us roughly what is an acceptable or the correct ratio for petcoke in an ovoid?
Well, it varies, Tom, on what you're mixing it with. Yeah. So you can't put, if you put too much petcoke in with too much bituminous, you may end up with an ovoid that's certainly not smokeless and could even be above the 2% sulfur limits.
Sure.
So you have to mix it in with the right amount of other ingredients. We generally use somewhere between about 20 and 35% in our ovoids. I can't think of an ovoid off the top of my head where we use more than that. I know some people do use more, and that obviously gives a different fire performance. But in the right controlled manner, and the right quality of petcoke, because petcokes can be high in sulfur, low in sulfur. You can have shot petcokes and different types of quality of petcokes. Then as long as you use the right stuff in the right way, blended with the right other products, then petcoke can be a real benefit to the ovoids.
Yeah, appreciate that. And part of the work that's gone on over the last 12 months is working on this ratio of getting the correct mix together for a product that works in our application, isn't it? Which I know we'll talk a bit more about later.
Yeah, absolutely. And then biomass is an interesting one, because biomass is obviously something we've been working with as a company now for in excess of 15 years. We've tried dozens and dozens of biomasses in our ovoids, and some work very well, some don't work at all. Using things like wood, for example, is very difficult to get wood to briquette because it's quite springy, so the ovoid can often fall apart. Other products like nutshells and rapeseed and cocoa shells and things like that, we've tried all of them, and they have different characteristics. And we currently use olive stones, so the stone of an olive rather than the flesh of the olive. And when the olive stone is the olives are crushed and the stone comes out and it's washed, and we crush that down, and that actually forms a really good addition into our mix of raw materials. It's obviously low in CO2. It's got good volatility, so we get a nice reactive fire with a good flame picture, and it's low in ash as well. So that really helps. As a coal substitute, biomass is a very good alternative, or olive stones are a good alternative.
And in terms of the olive stones, Julian, so this has come back around again in the latest version of Wildfire, and seems to have had a really positive effect on how the fuel behaves in our application. I also believe you perhaps made some changes to the manufacturing process. Are you able to sort of talk us through the benefit of the olive stones within Wildfire, certainly for how it's working within road steam?
Yeah, so the key differences we got to towards the end of last year was we'd obviously had a lot of feedback from NTET, and we'd had a lot of feedback from HRA. We'd had various trials going on with a number of different people, and where we got to was we decided to change the binder technology instead of going down a hot cure molasses binder, we decided to go down a cold cure process, and that was quite a step change for us, because I personally was very concerned about whether we could produce a hard enough ovoid, and the results I'll show you later show that we did, and also whether we could put the right amount of biomass into a manufactured fuel that was made with a resin binder. And that was something we hadn't done before, you know, we were very pleased to see that we did it, and we've done it an awful lot since, and it's working incredibly well. So that solved a number of problems for us. There was obviously the issue around chlorine, which we wanted to address that before it became an issue, to be perfectly honest. And also the cold cure process has a lower manufacturing cost, so that does allow us to reduce the cost of the ovoid as well. And of course, putting that biomass addition in, not only are we now reducing the CO2 output versus traditional coal, but you've got a smokeless fuel that's sub 2% on sulfur, and is effectively an approved smokeless fuel that's being burnt in a steam traction engine unit, which I think from a an environmental and socially responsible point of view is a real plus, is a real benefit for the steam traction community. So they're some of the key changes that we made, and feedback to date has obviously been quite positive, but we can talk a little bit about that.
I appreciate that, and I think it's important that those listening understand that this development has come about from the road steam and heritage rail sector, providing the fuel specifically targeting our market, with, dare I say, some happy side benefits, as you've just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. So just moving on here to the sort of the actual process of how an ovoid is made. Hopefully you can see this clearly on the screens, but effectively we take the raw materials that I just spoke about, whether it be the biomass, the coal, the anthracite, the pet coke. We put them into hoppers. They all are then they're all then carefully mixed and crushed before going into a mixing unit, and we test every raw material. Every raw material that comes in gets tested, so we know exactly the ash contents, sulfur contents, the heat outputs, exactly the same thing, because we all know that with mined natural products such as coal and anthracite, one mine doesn't produce a coal that's the same as another mine, and in fact even the same seam can produce different qualities of fuels, and so everything is tested before it goes in. That way we can ensure that the finished product is consistent time after time after time. So it all gets mixed in. It goes through a crusher where we crush the raw materials down to much smaller particulates, so we get a better binding and adhesion. It goes into a mixer. It's all mixed up, and then you have the resin and the hardener, and this is effectively the glue. This is an araldite. I'm sure we all remember that, where you had two tubes, and you had a hardener and the actual glue itself, and that's then added into the mix along with a strength enhancer, and all that is then just produced in batch quantities, and that's fed through to the press tires. So you've got two tires that run like that against each other, back to back, and and from that the shape of the ovoid is then formed. So you get an impression within the tires, and the mix goes into the impressions, and then it then passes through. From there, it goes over a screen so that any debris is picked up, then goes through a conveyor, screened again, and then onto the finished product. And at that point, the finished product is then left for up to 48 hours to cure further. The whole process will take about an hour to make an ovoid. It doesn't take that long, really. We produce around about 28 tons per hour, give or take, depending on the size and the type of the product that we're making.
Julian, I think a lot of people listening would say, well, if you're crushing coal, why can't we just have the lump coal instead? Why do we have to go through this process? And it sounds like a little bit simplistic to answer that, but just thought I would chuck it in the middle.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and the bottom line to it really is it's all about economics. Traditionally, if you imported coal into the UK, most people would buy, something like a 50,000 ton vessel of maybe a 0 by 150, 0 millimeters by 150 mil top size, or a 0 by 300 mil top size. And they would then screen out all the various size fractions from that, and they would sell them into different markets. So, you'd have singles for perhaps an industrial market. You would have the top size, the trebles, something like a 50 by 100 size going into heritage sectors, going into domestic sectors, and then doubles into domestic and heritage, and so on and so forth, right the way down to the fines and the smalls that would probably go into people like CPL and to the power stations. The problem we've got now, in today's money, a 50,000 ton vessel is likely to cost, I don't know, 12.5 to 15 million pounds to finance, which is a significant cost to finance. And you've then got to find somewhere to store 50,000 tons of coal. But from that 50,000 tons of coal, you'll probably be lucky to get 5,000 tons of what I'll call treble, so the top size for the heritage sector. And then you'd probably get about another 5 to 7,500 tons of doubles. So therefore, out of a 50,000 ton vessel, I've got 12,500 tons of sized coal that I can try and sell into the heritage sector. The heritage sector's 35,000 tons if I look at the whole lot, and which means I've got to take an awful lot of share. A lot of those members have got to buy my coal, but then I've also got 37,500 tons of other coal products that I've got to try and find a market for. And the problem is with that is that the power stations aren't taking fines and duff. CPL certainly wouldn't be taking, 37,500 tons in one go. And if I think I've got to multiply that by 3 to get me enough coal to supply the heritage sector, that's over 100,000 tons. So the market for the other fractions is reducing and becoming more and more difficult. And so you've got the cost of financing the coal, the cost of storing the coal. You've got the challenges of actually finding the coal in the right quality at the right price, because different coals from different parts of the world give very different fire performances. But also, you've got to think of the big challenge is, where am I going to sell it all to and at what price? So traditionally, the power industry would go and take all the smalls and the fines, and they would pay a very low price for it. But the trader, the importer, would make their money on the sized coal, and the domestic consumer in the heritage sector would pay a lot more money for the coal, because they would offset the smalls and the fines. But now that market's disappearing. The cement works aren't taking as much and are looking at alternative forms of fuel as well. So the challenge becomes, and with the ban also in England on the 1st of May of this year on the sale of coal, not necessarily on the burning of coal, but on the sale of coal, from the 1st of May, that's a big part of the domestic market that suddenly now disappeared and no longer accessible.
Well, I can hear very clearly that there's a finite life to fossil fuels, and I thought my trade was hard, but shifting 37,500 tons of black dust is going to be a challenge, and I can absolutely see and touch that there needs to be a life after fossil fuels for manufactured fuels. So what exactly are the alternatives? Where are you headed?
Well, our key focus on alternatives is really around looking at biomass and taking and waste to energy. So we've done work with BEES in particular, so Government Department for Business, Energy and Industrial, and we have done a number of pilot projects with them. We've just had a £5 million grant awarded by them to take us to the next level of how we might take waste products and turn it into carbon. So things like, our first round of research looked at any forms of waste. Could be old carpets, old clothes, it could be arboreal waste, agricultural waste, or just crops and things like that, and saying, right, we put them through various different types of technology. Torrefaction is a technology that's been around for many, many decades. We don't actually think torrefaction will get us there, but other forms of pyrolysis, like hydrothermal carbonization, which is a technology we've been trialing, whereby we take waste and we put it through a process and you take the waste and you put it in at huge pressures with high heat applied, and that then and at the byproduct of that, you get a waste that can be used, an eco waste that can be used in agricultural fertilizers, as well as a carbon product that then could go on into fuels or other types of applications. So that is really where our core activity is focused, around the biomass and around looking at what alternative forms of fuels we can use. I think it's important to note that I think, there is going to be a transition away from fossil fuels over the coming years. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen overnight. And what I do think also is that there are plenty of raw materials around globally that we can access. And in the last 12 months has certainly taught us that, we've been able to access alternative raw materials quite quickly, following, the closure of UK mining, the invasion of Ukraine, the ban on using Russian fuels. And Russia was a major exporter of fossil fuels. 80% of the world's anthracite that was traded globally came out of Russia. So when and sanctions were put on Russia, that created a huge challenge to many energy consuming industries, not just our own. But we found alternative sources, and I think we'll continue to innovate, and we are continuing to innovate. The fact that we now have, domestic fuels and fuels for the heritage sector that are containing reasonably large portions of biomass and are working, just shows just how far we've come in a very short period of time. Can we get to 100% biomass fuel? I don't think we're far off it. Can we get to 100% biomass fuel that could be used in a steam traction application? I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done. But if I think where we were 2 years ago or 18 months ago and where we are now, we have come on, just phenomenally. It's just phenomenal, and that's really just down to the will and commitment of all involved.
Well, I'm looking at the screen where we've got at the top left-hand side Fosse Fran and the bottom new wildfire. That's a Freudian slip. And if one looks at the characteristics, the volatile matter, sulfur, and the calorific values, the characteristics of your latest product, wildfire, do tend to mimic more or less the Fosse Fran. It's slightly less calorific, but not hugely. So that makes me think that maybe we seriously have got to go. But one question I did want to just pose to you: you've quite clearly talked about petcoke and the issues there, but some of our members are concerned about chlorine. So can you talk me through that issue, please?
Yeah, when we did trials with some of the HRA members in the I think it was early part of 22, some of the guys up at Keighley raised concerns about chlorine levels in the fireboxes, and obviously those guys were using predominantly copper boxes. Now, the issue came about really on a number of tests they did on one fire engine, on one particular engine they were using, and other members actually didn't report any issues. But we took samples of ash and fire residue away, and we analysed it. And there was a lot of work went in, to be fair, both by some of the HRA members and our own R&D and technical guys. And really, we came back to say, well, it was inconclusive whether the chlorine levels that were hitting 0.3, 0.25, 0.3 were damaging to the fireboxes or not. Anyway, we went away and we said, right, we at first we were concerned it was coming from the biomass, and then we did a lot of work and went, no, it's not coming from the biomass. The biomass actually got quite low levels of chlorine in it. In fact, the olive stone's got very low levels of chlorine in it. The chlorine was coming from the binder, from the molasses binder, and that's really what drove us down the route of going, right, we're going to try this in a resin binder, which obviously isn't plant-based and therefore has negligible levels of chlorine. And so it was never really an issue as such. There was no damage done to fireboxes, but it was a concern, and it was a concern to people with copper fireboxes in particular. So we just root caused it, found out where the high levels of chlorine were coming from, identified it was the molasses binder, and then we just said, right, we're going to manufacture it on our other plant, and we're going to change the process, and we're going to go down a cold cure route and use effectively what is a synthetic glue. And since then, we've not had any problems. Touch wood. We've done extensive trials with people like North York Moors, North Norfolk Railways, Keighley, and others, and nobody's raised any issues around chlorine or anything regarding fire residue or anything like that. So it's really just an example, to be quite frank, of how quickly this thing has developed over the last 12 months, and how quickly both we and the steam engine community has reacted to issues and dealt with it. And I have to say, there's been a lot of good brains put on this from both sides both the users and from our side, and it has surprised me sometimes just how much experience and knowledge there is, and how quickly we've just managed to resolve problems. So that was a really good example of how quickly we got over that.
And I think that's really important. And something I'd just like to put across as well was the issue of chlorine arose obviously through the railways primarily. We didn't see the same issues within root steam, mostly I guess because of the use of steel fireboxes didn't show the deposition up at all. But chlorine, it's not something we should be overly worried about, I don't feel, particularly in terms of the fact that this new wildfire iteration chlorine levels are either the same or lower than coal, and that is down to the work that CPL have done in terms of the reaction. So something I would just like to add to hopefully build confidence with the people listening is if concerns like this do arise, this is a new well, it's not really a new technology, but it's a new application perhaps for most of us using it in road steam or in steam engines at all. But if issues arise that we start to see a concern, this is absolutely to the credit of CPL how quickly they're able to react to that, carry out the analysis and address the problem. So I say that more for those that perhaps are still feeling some level of concern over a small amount of pet coke that may be present, or indeed a comment's just been made to me regarding sulfur. No sulfur levels exist in coal, and wildfire actually has a sulfur level that matches that of coal as well. So we see very similar characteristics from one to the other. But I just wish to add that because it's an important factor.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Tom. Just moving on, just to talk a little bit more about some of the process and activities that we're doing up at our plants up at Immingham. So as I mentioned, we've got the labs, we've got the R&D, we take quality control, hugely important, both the raw materials going in and the finished goods coming out. There's testing that goes on right throughout every production run. every 45 minutes samples are taken away for testing, and then fire testing is done at the end of every run as well. So there's a lot of testing going on. In terms of R&D, there's a lot of money spent on R&D. We've got a lot of big brains, far bigger than my brain, working on this sort of stuff. And there's lots of different things we're looking at, whether it be the binders that we're using and what additional binders we can use. I mean, 3 years ago, we looked at changing our resin binders as an example, and we did over 100 different tests with different binding technologies. And we had one of the chemical companies working with us on that. So that kind of gives you a scale of the sort of things that we're into. Biomass is definitely a big part of what we do, as well as just looking at waste in general and waste to energy, and how we can take everyday waste and perhaps use it in an environmentally friendly way without letting emissions seep out into the atmosphere, and turning it into a usable product in any number of applications. Thermally treating biomass, I think, will be hugely important for the steam heritage sector in terms of finding the next type of fuel to replace fossil fuels, because I think thermally treating biomass will allow us to increase fixed carbon content and increase bulk density of fuels as well. And I think that's going to be really important in your applications, and just general other carbon technologies, activation, regeneration. So there's an awful lot going on. Please don't think we're just here for the short term. We are around for a very, very long period of time, and we've got some big investments that have happened and that are still happening. So
I'm sure Tom's going to want to question you on something in a minute, but just to reaffirm, we in the movement feel that we're very privileged and lucky to have had a direct contact with your company, and indeed the research and development facilities that you've ploughed into it. And I think our listeners tonight and viewers need to understand that it's quite a complex process, and I think you've articulated that superbly. So on behalf of Trust, thank you for that. But Tom, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to jump back ever so quickly, just because we touched on quality control, which is obviously my area, and something that's very important to get across is with the manufactured fuel, particularly this one by CPL. The consistency of the product is absolutely key to the business, which means when you buy it as a consumer, it should have similar characteristics every time, which of course you don't necessarily get with a natural coal, given the variations in the seam. So yeah. I have to put that in just because obviously that's my field and I couldn't jump over it without saying it. But one important thing you mentioned towards the end there, Julian, was about being in this for the long term, and that is something that has come up from a few of our members, sort of trying to understand, how long does this continue for? We're starting to see some really positive results now from the new iteration of Wildfire. Obviously, it's still got to be trialled in various different applications, but what we are seeing is very positive. I guess the question is, are you with us for the long term, and are you still there to react to our feedback, as we see things develop throughout this season in particular, but potentially more years to come?
Yeah. I mean, we absolutely, Tom. We are, as a business, we are looking to develop and evolve, and looking for new markets, and looking to say, look, where we see declines in one sector, we need to be offsetting that in other areas. And what's been really helpful over the last 18 months, 2 years, is that the challenges that you guys are facing are equally being had by numerous other people in numerous other industries, and we're having exactly the same conversations with people, not in the steam heritage sector, but in other industrial applications, and they've got the same issues with coal availability and pricing and variability in quality and decarbonizing and all those sort of challenges. And what we're able to do is share our experiences and R&D that we're doing with you and with them, with each other, and just saying, look, what are we learning here? What did we learn when we tried to put 80% biomass in this product? what did we learn from that? You know, did it work? Didn't it work? You know, and we're able to, and the key thing is we're able to take that learning and just apply it across many different sectors. So that's the beauty of having our own in-house labs and R&D, is that we can take all of that, and we've got, you know, years worth of data to back us up on this stuff. So, you know, as a business, you know, we just spent, you know, 1.7 million pounds 18 months ago, 2 years ago, on a brand new Parnaby cyclone washing facility, which is all about dealing with the importation of fossil fuels so we can wash and screen it ourselves. We're now pretty much one of the only ones in the UK with that facility. That's a really important piece of equipment for the UK to have. We wouldn't have done that if we thought we were only going to be using it for the next 2 years. You know, our view is that we're going to be bringing fuels in for quite some period of time, because there are still many sectors within the UK that are reliant on different types of solid fuel, whether it be coals or anthracites or metallurgical coals or petcokes or whatever. So, yeah, we're very much in it for the long term. We've been around, you know, for many years already. We've got a very long lease on our land up at the Immingham docks, and you know, we're just about every year we spend, you know, several million pounds on new equipment and upgrading machinery and technology, and this year will be no different. So yeah, we're absolutely committed to ensuring that there is a solid fuel industry for many decades to come, and it will be different, and it will change, and you know, what goes into the briquettes will change, and you know, but ultimately, you know, there's a strong domestic market. You know, 200,000 new stoves have been sold this year. That's a 60% increase on last year. So and those stoves will be in homes for the next 10 to 15 years, and I don't see that slowing down. So the market is strong.
It's reassuring to hear, and obviously, you know, as I mentioned, it's a relatively new sector for most of us with engines to even think about. So it's good to hear that there is that investment, quite a significant investment in the future. Obviously, we've trialled this new version of Wildfire in a few applications. Obviously, myself with the Foden wagon and the Sentinel as well, and seen some good results. Obviously, we have to accept that won't necessarily be the case for everyone, but we're hopeful that'll be the case. Last year, you may recall, obviously, we conducted some trials at Bedford Rally where we tried to use the older version of, or the heritage version of Wildfire and a different product to run. Sorry, I'm stuttering. To run the skid ride with a Showman's engine. This is what we've referred to as a high demand application. At this stage, we haven't really had chance to significantly stress test new Wildfire in a high demand application, although I do count the Sentinel being in that camp. If we're still struggling with this, is this something you're able to continue to support us with?
We're able to continue to support with the fuel, most definitely. And if the latest product, the new Wildfire, you know, we think needs further enhancement, changes, refinement, call it what you will, then absolutely we can have a look at that. The one area where we fall down on is we don't have the appliances, you know, to test. You know, like you have. I mean, you know, our core business has been built up and focused around domestic appliances and domestic burning, and that's obviously a very different area than to what you're using it for, and indeed the HRA are using it for. But you know, in terms of, you know, fuel development, fuel enhancement, what's working, what's not. I mean, you know, in terms of, you know, the next steps, you know, we do need to absolutely keep testing, keep feeding back, and try and see, right, where's the commonality, where are the threads of what's working, what's not, what do we need to pull on to make this even better. You know, we're absolutely up for that. We're constantly, you know, we're getting feedback from you know, you and your members, and then we're saying, right, what raw materials are available to us, you know, both in the short term and medium to long term. And then saying, right, okay, you know, how do we match the requirements of this steam engine application with the raw materials that are available to us, whilst at the same time trying to achieve, the longer term goals, which, we can see here on the screen. We want to find a suitable alternative to coal and steam coal, which, I think will be phased out at some point. We want to. I think it's important. I think you guys think it's important that we kind of find an eco-friendly type of fuel without wishing to sound like a tree hugger, but we've all got to do our bit, and it's important that that we find fuels that minimize the environmental impact, whether that be through air quality and particulate emissions, or whether that be through CO2 reductions, or indeed other heavy metals and gaseous compounds. So those are things that we are constantly looking to do. And the key thing there is it's got to be affordable. We've got to make sure we've got something that doesn't stretch the budget to the point where people just say, "What's the point? I can't afford to run it anymore." That would be a real shame. Yeah. So, from our point of view, we are looking to you guys to do extended trials throughout 2023 on different types of appliances, and provide further feedback and say, what was good, what bad. We spoke earlier about different sizes of ovoids and how important that might be for some applications, as well as what's going into them, because the biomass addition in the new wildfire is quite significant. We're up to nearly 30%, and that's a significant amount of biomass in those fuels. So from an environmental point of view, that's a really strong selling message, when you're talking to people at shows. And I've had feedback from people who have said to me, "Oh, I got grief from this member of the public because I had black smoke puffing out the top of the chimney and they didn't like it," and all of that. And I just think that that's probably, we're not just hearing that through numerous channels, and that sort of conversation is likely to get even worse. So it's important that we can prove that we're on the front foot here and we're doing something about it, and that we're moving as fast as we possibly can.
I think that's the important factor, is moving at the right speed, because initially when we saw products which were biomass heavy, they didn't seem to behave particularly well in the engines when they were trialed. But what we have seen is the development take it to a point where 30% content is a significant part, but it's having a positive benefit to the performance of the fire and the engine. So for me, from a traction engine owner's point of view, we sort of have to wear two hats. And I guess my first hat is always a fuel that works in the application and does what we want it to do. But secondly, following up very closely behind that is the environmental side. And I'm pleased to see that we seem to be heading in that direction, perhaps more rapidly than I honestly thought we would be. So that's a real major positive.
Well, that's really important, Tom, because whilst we know that road steam represents 0.014% of the current emissions from the UK, we are committed, and we can't bury our heads in the sand. We need to support and to move towards a more carbon-friendly fuel. And to hear that we've got already a 30% reduction in coal products that we're ending up burning, I think that's very encouraging. We're only a small section in the solid fuel market, Julian. So what is the main market for manufacturers' fuels, and what do you think is going to happen to that in the longer term?
Well, the main market, if you strip out obviously power industry, but the main market for smokeless solid fuels, manufactured solid fuels, is obviously the domestic market. And in the UK, with the ban on coal in England coming into effect on the 1st of May of this year, and with lack of availability of anthracite at the moment, and the closure of Celtic last year, the market for manufactured smokeless fuels is probably somewhere around 600 to 650,000 tons a year in the UK, and then there's a similar size market over in Ireland. And Europe is much smaller, but it's still a reasonable size. So that's the main part of the market, but that market is changing and evolving, and there's still going to be a strong domestic market, I think, for many years to come, not least at the moment, obviously, with the price of alternative forms of energy such as gas, oil. People are looking at, putting in multi-fuel stoves and using, opening up their old open fires. So that's good from our point of view, obviously, that we still see strong demand, and we're still seeing strong organic growth within that sector. And obviously the move away from some of the traditional coals and anthracites to manufactured smokeless fuels is obviously great from a sort of an environmental point of view. And DEFRA, the government has quietly but most definitely backed manufactured smokeless fuels as a suitable alternative to traditional fossil fuels, even as it sees a place for it, even against gas. So we've had many conversations with DEFRA, and they openly see the benefits of manufactured smokeless fuels. And it's worth remembering that over 200,000 homes in the UK rely on solid fuel as their primary heating source. So, it's not just, people putting in stoves in urban areas or semi-urban areas or semi-rural areas. It is for 200,000 homes. It is their primary heating source for water, whether that be for bathing or whether that be for heating their homes. So it's still a very, very important fuel source.
And to be clear, the version of Wildfire is commercially available to all as a domestic product, isn't it?
Yeah. So one of the great benefits of the new Wildfire product is that at the moment it seems that not only is it working, we developed it as an alternative to traditional coal. That was the reason behind it. We obviously switched to the coal cure process, feedback from the heritage sector, and then we said, right, we can take this forward using biomass as a traditional coal replacement. So it's not surprising that some of the feedback we're getting has been quite as positive as it has. I'm probably a little bit surprised at just how positive it's been, but I guess we set out with the intention to say we want to produce a fuel that is smokeless, produces 80% less smoke than traditional coal, produces 30% less CO2 than traditional coal, can be burnt in smoke controlled areas, unlike traditional coal, but mimics the fire performance of a traditional coal. And the feedback we're getting from coal merchants, domestic users, and now, of course, yourselves, is that this is actually doing a job. This is probably as close as a manufactured smokeless fuel has ever got to being a suitable coal replacement. And so that's really encouraging. And that's I'll be honest with you, 2 years ago I didn't think we would get there. So to be there now is I'm really pleased about it.
You're absolutely right. And 12 months ago, 12 months ago, from a road steam point of view, it didn't look particularly promising, I have to be honest. The sort of last year to 2 year development from your side, but a year that we've been very much involved has been rapid, and dare I say, I'm very positive about the way this is going now. I guess the bit that perhaps puts a slight question in most people's minds that we do need to tackle then, and you did touch upon it in the last slide, so we'll go for it. What is typically the price point for manufactured fuels then, and can it really be competitive, I guess is what we'd like to understand.
Well, can it be competitive? I mean, the market remains incredibly volatile at the moment, and there are still a lot of very high priced raw materials within the supply chain. We've obviously been out and had to secure raw materials, last year and this year, just to ensure that we maintain continuity of supply into the solid fuel sector, whether that be for domestic use or other industrial and heritage uses. There are signs that prices are coming down, and if you look at our new wildfire price, we've reduced the price of that £90 a tonne from where we were in the winter. So we were at £515 a tonne for loose delivered onto lorry. We're now 425, which is a sharp reduction from where we were in about 5 months. We've got prices on there for pre-pack, and one of the advantages of CPL and stroke HomeFire is that we'll deliver small quantities to the door. So people may only want 6, 7, 10 bags, subject to normally we're about £150 minimum order value. We'll deliver that, and of course at less than a tonne or less, you're subject to only 5% VAT because you're part of the de minimis rule. Prices are we expecting to see a sharp decline in prices? I'll be honest with you, the forward picture at this moment in time does not suggest there will be a collapse in prices. Prices will not come down at the rate at which they went up in the last 12 months. Probably doesn't surprise people to hear that, but unfortunately that is the case. But we are looking at it all the time, and the fact that we've managed to bring down the price of the wildfire £90 a tonne since the start of the winter to now, I think it highlights our commitment to try and keep prices as low as possible, as quickly as possible. The price of manufacturing a smokeless ovoid is generally higher than digging coal out of the ground, but there are obviously other advantages. We've obviously had to invest a lot of money in the R&D. We've got a significant infrastructure. We're a large organization. We're trying to produce a product that's consistent in quality time after time after time, and we're providing national pricing. So we're trying to provide pricing for NTET members that it doesn't matter whether you're in up in the central belt of Scotland or down in Truro and Penzance. We'll be trying to be fair and uniform in our pricing. So there's no regional variations to our pricing. So will it be competitive? Yes, I think it will be competitive. I think we are competitive now. We've seen very strong demand for manufactured smokeless fuels in the last 12 months. We've seen a huge number of people who had traditionally burnt fuels like anthracite and coal switching into manufactured smokeless fuels. Graham has spent a lot of time over the last 6 months talking to people about how to get the best from their fuels, and a lot of people are finding that the more they use it, the more they burn it, the more they get used to it, the less they're using on their fires, the more confidence they gain with it, and actually they're realizing that actually some of these fuels, these manufactured fuels, are burning for longer and providing more heat over a longer period of time than traditional fossil fuels. So there's pricing is something that we are acutely aware that we want to be competitive, and we want to ensure that it is affordable for all users, whatever the application.
Okay. Well, Julian, we've been in discussions about a special price. I won't swear at using the word discount. I know it's bad language, but it has to be discussed. You've been very kind in agreeing to enter into discussions about how we could help our members buy better from you and encourage the use of this fuel with the D word. So I'm sure that that's going to be a very interesting conversation between us, but I'm very confident that we're going to reach a conclusion to that word and what it means to our members. So I think that shows a really strong commitment from you to us, and I hope from us to you, because if we can, through stress testing the engines that are higher demands, such as road locomotives with loads on, or as Tom said, running running dodgems and lights at shows, then if you can get that fuel right for us there, then everything down the hill from that is plain sailing. So it's really optimistic, I think, for the future of our movement. Tom, you've really been pushing this through for the last 6 to 8 months. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I think it's fair to say the last 12 months have been a roller coaster for all of us that are on this call in various ways. And although I'm fully aware Graham hasn't spoken much within this, but I really do want to sort of sing Graham's praises as part of this development work. So for those of you who are not aware, Graham is the technical expert from CPL who's probably had to tolerate more phone calls from me in the last 12 months than he wishes to acknowledge. But he's also been the guy who's been out at various railways and attending traction engine rallies and sitting in the rain in coal bunkers and various other things, hopefully enjoying it at times, but gathering the information firsthand. So that is absolutely to the credit of CPL for dedicating a person for all this time to work on this development. And again, I can only reiterate what we've tried to get across in this presentation this evening, just a positive step or positive change that's been made from where we were when we started out on trying to develop a fuel, to the point where obviously I will remain as honest as I possibly can and as unbiased as I possibly can, that we are, or certainly from the tests that I've been involved with, we are seeing some very positive results from this, and I hope that continues to be the case for others when they trial this fuel. The fact that it is already available and on the market is an amazing achievement, you know, given where we potentially could have been had that not have been the case. So I do strongly hope that it continues to be successful for other people, and I hope this evening has gone some way to alleviating people's concerns, perhaps over some of the you know, concerns that have been raised previously around chlorine and pet coke. I feel we've certainly touched upon pet coke and tried to share some of the data on that, but I know some people potentially want to know more on that. So what I will recommend is that I talk with CPL off the back of this and gather a bit more specific information on pet cokes. And the table that was shown earlier, I've used bits of this information in various different presentations, but I think it's important that we share that, and it's something that's understood by potential users alike, so you can draw your own conclusions. Ultimately, that's what this is all about, helping you make a decision as to whether a manufactured fuel is going to be the correct solution for you in the future. Personally, I'm pretty confident and comfortable with it myself. So I think
yeah, absolutely, Tom, absolutely. I think that that tonight's discussions have been, you know, very technical, complete and rounded, and it's super to be in the presence of experts. But I think just to kind of clarify that this type of fuel is available in bulk, or if you know, larger rallies that might want, you know, multiple pre-packed 22 pallet loads, it's available. The network of wholesalers and distribution points with CPL around the country is substantial. So this is here, it's working, it's up and running, and we just need to try this. So I would suggest that to the NTET or registered rallies that use our scheme, perhaps give some thought to engaging with this type of fuel. We're going to learn through this year, and there's still plenty of time to be able to purchase this fuel if you want. Clearly, it's absolutely your choice. I'm just reiterating that it's here, it's on the shelf, and you can put it in your trolley, if you know what I mean. You might have a problem getting through the checkout, but that's the principle. So with you know, the discount sitting around NTET, I think that we've as a trust have discharged our obligation to our members and to the wider movement to engage and to try and support the finding of a solution. And I really hope that tonight you will all agree that I think the solution is in front of us, and it's only going to get better. So has anybody else got anything they'd like to say before I wish our viewers and attendees a good night?
No, that's that's a good summary, Rob, and many thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk about what we're doing and looking forward. It's been really interesting.
It's my pleasure, Julian. Thank you. And Graham, thank you to you.
You're very
being
welcome. Even though I haven't had a great deal of involvement in the conversations, Julian's obviously very eloquently answered the questions. I just want to reiterate and say, you know, this development of the fuel, the feedback from your members is paramount in the development. Without the experience and knowledge and feedback from those, you know, we really haven't got any direction on what you require. So I appreciate, you know, Tom's comments and Tom's involvement over the last 12 months, as well as other members who have trialed and tested the fuels for us. It's really appreciated.
You're very welcome. And one thing I can say, Graham, is behind every successful sales director, there's a bloody overworked, there's an overworked technical chap. So the fact that you've not uttered too many words is to your credit, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well,
And can I extend that, Rob, to say that obviously the NTET is a charity organisation in its own right, and we've always opened this up to members and non-members alike, and feedback from both has been absolutely critical. And I thank everyone that has provided that feedback and has spoken to me at rallies over the last year or so. But I would also like to say thank you to those that are members, because being a member is exactly the reason why we're able to conduct this work. And this isn't the only thing that we're doing, as many of you know, but it's absolutely key to protecting the future of the hobby. So yeah, a very personal thank you.
And I absolutely echo your words, Tom. We have always taken the view that we must open all of our expertise up to the wider movement, but we can't do it if we don't get the support of users becoming members. So I hope that, you know, I think sometimes we can be accused of 4 magazines a year or whatever it is, which is one of the ones that's been chucked in my bin. But this particular piece of work that, Tom, you have led and that CPL has taken forward, I think has been really valuable. So, Tom, from me to you, and thank you very much indeed. You know, the times that I've bent your ear and you've listened to me waffling and you've come back with a very contrite, specific answer, you know, they're multiple. And I'm very grateful. And to all of the attendees that have been with us tonight, I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, found it of interest, and you now are just better understanding of the future of manufactured coals. And if you do want to have a look at this webinar again, and indeed any of the webinars that we will be holding, and this is the last one for our spring offering, but we will be doing more in the winter. We will be popping them up onto our website, ntet.co.uk, and also on our YouTube channel. So any simple search will manage that. But the one person that we haven't mentioned is the backroom girl. Naomi has been instrumental in handling all of our webinars. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am for having someone that knows what they're doing when I carry on waffling. So Naomi, you've got your mouthpiece off, but you're on the scene, my dear, but you're not unrecognised for what you do. So from me to you, thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, panelists, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us and to listen. We'll catch you again soon, if not on the rally fields, maybe later in the year, when we've got another interesting topic for you to enjoy. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.